So from here, we're recording this session. So this training session focuses on the challenges that many municipal departments face in developing and implementing nature-based solutions and working across the different departments. So this is something that many of our Grow Green cities have experienced, and in particular, the reconciling of the different goals and aligning of different work practices and how to address nature-based solutions effectiveness is one of the challenges we've heard about. During this session, we have invited speakers from different cities. Gilles Lecuir from the Paris Region Biodiversity Agency, Frédéric Ségur from the Green Spaces Department of Greater Lyon, and Helen Nielsen from the Environment Department of the City of Malmo to share with us some of their experiences in how they have worked across different city departments. And the presentations will give you the chance to hear some of their insights. But after that, as said, we will also have the chance to ask questions and to discuss and exchange ideas with each other, also to hear from the experiences of the Grow Green cities. So with that, I would like to hand over to my colleague Kate, who will tell you a little bit more about the tool that we will use for the discussion, and to introduce the speakers to you. As a last point, I also want to ask you to switch off your videos, because when we record the presentations, it will be better, and it may be a bit less personal, but it hopefully also will help us to keep the capacity of the system so that we have good quality. So over to you.
Thank you, Chantal. So we are going to have a question and answer session, which will be as usual. And then at the end of the session, we're going to have an open discussion. And to support the discussion, we're going to use a tool called Flinger. And Flinger is sorry, I'm just changing the screen. Flinger is basically a virtual whiteboard. So the idea will be that you can post your messages to the whiteboard and they'll show up where you put them. You can move them around, and we'll use this to collect ideas and to support the discussion that we'll do at the end of the session. I'll give you more details on how exactly that's going to work later on. So for now, to introduce the speakers, we have 3 speakers today, as Chantal already mentioned. The first speaker is Gilles Lecuir, who is project manager at the Regional Agency for Biodiversity in the Paris region. He's an expert in urban ecology and public policies. And since 2010, he has run the French Capital of Biodiversity Award. So he'll be giving us some examples from that. Then we will have a presentation from Frédéric Ségur, who works at the Trees and Landscape Department of Greater Lyon. His background is in biology and ecology and as a forest engineer. His Trees and Landscapes Department is in charge of the city's nature strategy, the tree charter, and the canopy plan. Frédéric is a member of the Scientific Council of Plantes Cités, which is a French institute for urban nature and landscapes, and he is vice president of the French Presidential Organization for Landscape Companies. Lastly, Helen Nielsen will give us some insight and examples from Malmo. She is a project manager in the Environment Department in the City of Malmo in Sweden. She manages projects related to urban farming and sustainable food, and is currently working on the Horizon 2020 Nature-Based Solutions project, Naturebation. So with that, I will pass over to Gilles for our first presentation. Gilles, I will make you presenter, and then you can unmute yourself and present whenever you're ready.
Here I am. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Shall I open the video, or is it okay with only the sound?
It's fine with only the sound if you prefer. That's great.
No, it's okay. So, sorry, I'm not at all at the right place. Just a second. Hop. Just a big spoiler. So, I will just, so some of you already met me in Paris in January, and I'm very happy to be back again with you. I will show you two examples of relationships between municipal services and or stakeholders around what I call nature-based solution, but I choose examples that maybe are limit or at least are not common. First example is about cemeteries, and French cemeteries are historically in France, and I know it can be quite different in other countries, especially in Northern Europe. French cemeteries are historically more mineral than Anglo-Saxon cemeteries, but while grass between tombs was the norm until the beginning of the 20th century, the massive use of chemical herbicides then completely transformed the perception of plants in this place. The only plants tolerating being horticultural spontaneous herbs perceived as a sign of abandonment, a feeling incompatible with mourning. As we began to stop the use of pesticides in cities, the cemetery thus become the last hard point. 10 years ago, several large French cities demonstrated that this difficulty was overcome, as Rennes, for example, a city which was the French capital of biodiversity awarded in 2016, sorry. And then they demonstrated that this difficulty was overcome by grassing the paths made from gravel or sand, generally through sowing. In 2019, 77% of the 1,800 municipalities of Paris region, we have a huge amount of municipalities of all size in France, they weren't using any pesticides at all, including in their cemetery. French law has also authorized the use of pesticides since 2017 only in cemeteries, sports ground, and motorway interchanges. But the real accelerator came, from my point of view, from the city of Lyon, which was the French capital of biodiversity 2013, which created a natural cemetery on a land reserve adjoining its traditional mineral cemetery. It first chose to do with nature existing on this plot, trees, shrubs, with tombs in the ground. So I will try to show you some images. So with tombs in the ground, driveways covered with grass in earth-stone mixture to allow the vehicles to come inside the cemetery. Sober and natural materials like chestnuts for fences, simple local limestone engraved for identification, and also a steel sculpture made by an agent of technical services of the city for animation of the Garden of Remembrance, where families come to spread the ashes from the cremation. The initial idea and the design came from the municipal service in charge of birth and death registration, which is in charge of funeral affairs, and not from the Green Spaces service. This one was all, of course, associated and provides maintenance today, but the concept is indeed a funeral concept. the political support of the then mayor, who was very committed to issues of nature, was obviously important. Two other stakeholders are involved in the management of the cemeteries. Families who own a concession, who create considered to be private and not public space, and funeral directors who create the tombs and sometimes maintain them. In mineral cemeteries, usually they use bleach. No obligation can be made to them by the city on their concession. This is why the city of Niort adopt a charter for families, and you'll find a lot of links. Well, I will change here is it. You'll have the PDF, and you'll find the links to the charter. And the charter includes commitments such as clothing the deceased with biodegradable and non-synthetic clothing, but also limitation of thanatopraxia care, which uses formaldehyde, using a coffin in untreated wood or cardboard, and no potted flowers. At the beginning, the tombs were intended to be simply grassed, and family at the possibility of planting, you can see this, planting a plant to choose from a palette of local plants defined by the city. In fact, as you can see here on those, on this image, in fact, today the graves are delimited with a wooden frame, and horticultural plantation seem the norm on the tombs. Obviously, we and many others have communicated about this new model of cemetery, and I believe that this pioneering work has greatly contributed to transforming the perception, first of elected officials and municipal technicians, and this has opened the door to rapid transformation, which otherwise would have encountered much more resistance. We are launching a 4-year ecological survey on 45 cemeteries in Paris region as the regional agency for biodiversity, and we will be assessing flora, fauna, pollinators using citizen science protocol, and we will try to answer the question about, are those places by nature calm and quiet, are part of the green infrastructure inside the cities. Second example, a building with a green roof, but not only. And my question is it something towards future schoolyards? It's a primary school and a gymnasium created in Boulogne-Billancourt, an immediate neighbor of Paris to the west, in a very dense urban sector, in the process of urbanizing an industrial wasteland. The architect designed this school as an envelope capable of welcoming spontaneous flora and fauna. The roofs are vegetated with a soil depth of 30 centimeters for meadows to 1.20 meters for small wood. They were planted with plants chosen from a local palette, and the facades have been designed so that the rain flows in and that roughness and holes can accommodate spontaneous plants and birds, insects, even bats. Here again, the role of the elected representative municipal councillor responsible for the biodiversity at this time was a driving force. The architects also associated an ecologist with the design as well as the construction and plantation. Again, you'll find a lot of links to French documents and witnesses from the different stakeholders in it. But in the management phase, after the construction, the stakeholders of a French school are very complex. For example, education, teachers depend on the French state. They find their authority in the French state education ministry, not at all in the city. Extracurricular activities before and after lessons, school meals, are the responsibility of the city of Boulogne-Billancourt. Building and green space maintenance are the responsibility of the district of the Greater Paris metropolis. Of course, users are represented by parents' associations and neighborhood residents of adjacent buildings. We, the Regional Biodiversity Agency for the Paris region, were very interested in this achievement and first made a quick inventory of the flora of the green roof and walls 2 years after construction. Then we brought together all those stakeholders to offer them long-term ecological monitoring and adapted management plan, which was unsuccessful due to a lack of funding. However, that gave us the idea of our green roof verified ecosystem services study, which we told you about last January in Paris, and we included this building in our sample, of course. Some element of feedback to temper our real and our enthusiasm that is real. When the building was delivered, the concrete facade finally seemed very austere to the city and the neighborhood. They didn't want to wait for the spontaneous, necessarily slow flora, and climbing plants were added at the foot of the facade. You can see them here and there, and these are planting plants, and these are spontaneous plants only. Another point, climbing, you can see here the schoolyard and the access to the rooftop with the meadows, and climbing plants pits had been planned and created in the schoolyard here in order to create an internal green wall, very low-tech green wall. And from the first year, the teachers asked that they be plugged because the children were playing the ground and it was dirty. And the city obeyed and poured concrete in place of the planting pits. And the other thing is the roof is accessible to children, but only for activities. It is not a schoolyard. They cannot go on the meadows or on the rooftop garden and in the little wood alone. They have to be with an adult and in special times. So they cannot play every day on this natural part. So the schoolyard is still this very mineral place, and maybe that's something that could be improved in another attempt or another realization, another school. This is it, my two examples. I hope that I'll give you some ideas and questions.
Thank you very much, Gilles. That was extremely interesting to illustrate the wide range of stakeholders that can have a role to play in nature-based solutions in cities and the different types of environments where we can install green infrastructure or nature-based solutions. The cemeteries example coming from the municipal service in charge of births and deaths registration was really interesting to see that a department that wasn't the green spaces department could initiate something so useful and so potentially beneficial for biodiversity and also for the broader benefits of natural spaces in cities. So we're going to keep the questions until the end, if that's okay. So at this point, I will pass over to Frédéric for his presentation. Thank you very much, Gilles. And Frédéric, I will make you the presenter.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you today. Just a minute, and I begin quickly because I have lot to tell you about trees, climate, and nature-based solution. But I can't see my presentation.
No, we can't see your screen yet. You have the presenter role, so you should be able to share it. And let me know if you have trouble.
I'm looking at how it works.
Yep.
I don't know where I am.
It's confusing. It was confusing me. We see your whole screen. You can pick just one application to share.
I have. Sorry, I'm lost in this. Oh là là là, ça marche comment?
Would you like me to share mine and then you tell me when to change slides?
I have. J'ai perdu.
Frédéric, pour passer
Non, mais j'arrive pas à trouver la
d'un endroit à
connexion.
un autre,
Je vois même plus le GoToMeeting. Alors tu vois, c'est
normal. En fait, il faut que tu affiches ta présentation. Donc tu fais Alt tabulation jusqu'à ce que tu affiches ta présentation. Tu fais F5. Pendant ta présentation, tu ne verras que ta présentation et pas le GoToMeeting. Mais nous, on voit ton écran.
Là, vous voyez la présentation?
C'est parfait.
Oui, parfait.
Voilà.
Alors, je suis pas au début.
Ça y est, ok, ça.
Sorry for this delay.
Don't worry.
It doesn't work well. So, now I can begin. So, hello everybody. So I will talk to you about the nature-based solution linked with the Lyon Metropole Canopy Plan. So the Greater Lyon Authority, it's 59 towns around Lyon, and we are involved in urban forestry at 3 different levels. The maintenance and planting of trees in the highway and public squares across the whole Greater Lyon area. Today it represents 100,000 trees, street trees. We also have parks and private properties, and we work for the development of new green space and natural areas. For the moment in the Greater Lyon, there is about 9,000 hectares of green space, mainly on private lands that have been made accessible to the local population. And we also work for the statutory protections of trees in urban planning documents. More than 8,000 hectares of trees are protected in the land use plan. Several political commitments in favor of nature and trees took place through the development and adoption of an urban ecology charter in 1992, which was updated in 1997, and then a tree charter in 2000, which was updated in 2011. This new tree charter, which was co-written with a lot of local stakeholders, has now been adopted by over 120 signatories. It's municipalities, professional federation, non-for-profit and community organizations, private companies, training centers, developers, social housing companies, and so on. The tree charter is built on the rediscovery of services provided by trees and nature, on social, ecological, and economic aspect. And so the chart promotes nature-based solution. One of the main issues we have to face in Lyon is climate change. A study of the main vulnerabilities of our territory related to climate change shows that it will be sanitary problems for population linked to the heat wave. That it's the most important problem we have to face. And the sanitary effect of summer heat waves is amplified by the urban heat island effect. This effect is caused by the accumulation of heat in the hard and often dark material used in built-up areas, such as for street surfacing, and it leads to an artificial increase in temperature from 2 to 4 degrees all of the year, and it's particularly intense at nighttime. We have measured up to 7 to 11 degrees Celsius more in the center, comparing to a rural place outside of the city during the night, during a heat wave, for example. So it's really important for population. So the Greater Lyon has developed the adaptation part of its climate plan with 5 main objectives. And the second one is to fight against heat island effect with 2 linked different strategies: the permeable city project and the canopy plan. So the canopy plan is a hybridization of the tree charter with the local climate plan. Is based on the effect of trees on temperatures. There is several effects of trees on the climate: shading effect, reduction of solar radiation on mineral surfaces, change in the airflow, and evapotranspiration, which is maybe the more important things. And that's the reason why it's important to link the tree strategy with the rainwater management, because water is a resource for evapotranspiration of plants. So we have also studied from photo interpretation the canopy cover of Lyon Metropole. The amount is about 4,500 hectares, which represent 27% of the land area and near 3 million trees. But we have 2 main conclusions. First, 80% of these trees are on private properties. It means that the public action is not enough to protect and develop them and to have an action on climate. And also this study shows a real territorial imbalance between western part and eastern part of the conurbation. And this imbalance of the canopy is also accompanied by other social and environmental imbalance. So it needs a real territorial strategy and global policy to correct it. So the canopy plan is to apply at all scale, from town planning studies to small local developments. canopy plan concern all the components of the natural ecosystems. The solution to climate issue are also good for biodiversity issue. So we're working on the plants in all possibilities for buildings or open place. So the canopy plan promote nature-based solution and transdisciplinary logic. It means having different departments work together. And it requires to involve, encourage, and coordinate many stakeholders, in particular the tree charter network. And the objectives of the canopy plan is to move from 27% to 30% of canopy covered by 2030, with two main objectives: the protection of the existing urban forest, improving the tree protection in town planning rules, and also by organizing the planting of at least 300,000 trees on the Lyon metropole by 2030. This strategy requires innovation efforts. Three main research areas were prioritized: the preservation and enhancement of local fertile soil resource. This is the first point of this strategy. The second is the relationship between landscape and water cycle management. And finally, the link between urban nature and climate change. So for the first objective, if we want to green the city, fertility of urban soil is a real challenge. So it's the first area research we are studying for more than 20 years. Most new urban plantation takes place on lands that are mostly sterile because already urbanized, generating an important increase in demand in fertile soil. On the other hand, the artificialization of the soil must be stopped and the natural and agricultural space preserved around the cities. These orientations have the effect of gradually reducing the supply of topsoil. Putting these two trends in perspective suggests a reversal in the relationship between supply and demand of topsoil in the next few years. The supply of fertile land has never been an important issue for cities, since urban sprawl has generated much more arable land than is needed for park and plantation projects. So we have developed a soil strategy based on 4 complementary axes. The first is to improve soil knowledge to value fertile materials. The objective is to preserve and rationalize the use of non-renewable resources. So we have soil mapping on every project. The second axis is to create stock exchange for fertile materials through the Greater Lyon. it means to mutualize materials between different urban projects. The third axis is to develop a technique for reconstitution of fertile soil with some urban waste. And the fourth axis is to improve existing soil with ecological genius technique. I don't know if it's the real word for it, but so in our project, this different approach can be combined. So the second research area, so it's a link between canopy and water cycle. Many experiments have been carried out in the occasion of urban development project for more than 15 years. So we have had a transdisciplinary internal project called the Permeable City. It considers water as a resource for many use, biodiversity, plant health, landscape, urban refreshment. So water is a resource and not a risk or a waste, like it's often the case. So we have many experiments for more than 15 years, both in rural areas or in high density urban areas, like here in a public square planted near the Pardieu station in the center of Lyon. And continuous fertile soil was created under pavement surface, but all the rainwater can go down to the fertile soil. And the third area of research is the link between canopy and climate change. We also use urban development project, like you see a Garibaldi Street project, to study this topic. We have conducted temperature measurement campaigns to see the effect of vegetation on temperature. So you see there is different kind of measure and effect, but it's really important the effect for the human body. We also had the opportunity to transform an old tunnel into an underground rainwater storage basin. And with the support of an European program on IoT, so IoT is Internet of Things, we could setting up a network of connected sensors all around the project, on the soil and also on the trees. You can see on this picture different kind of sensor we use to see the temperature and the growth and evapotranspiration of trees, and the presence of water in the soil. The idea we wanted to test is to use the rainwater collected and stored for massive irrigation only during heat waves, which often correspond to a period of drought. So as to boost the evapotranspiration of trees and improve the thermal comfort of the district. So last year, we were able to take measurement during the 2 periods of heat wave we have had. Late June and late July, we have had 2 very important heat wave periods. And this graphic show that irrigation allow tree to continue evapotranspiration with an effect on local temperature. So this year we planned a new measurement campaign to confirm this result, and also to define the replication condition of this model for other urban projects. So that was my example, and you can see on this we have a blog where you can find a lot of document about tree charter and canopy plant of the metropole of Lyon. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Frederic, for an extremely interesting presentation. It really shows how everything is linked, and your projects demonstrated an integrated approach to managing water and managing heat and managing soil, so that you could get benefits in all those components. So again, we're going to keep the questions until the end. So if you have any burning questions right now, then note them down and we'll come back to them later. For now, Frederic, you can stop sharing your screen when you're ready. And
up.
Yeah, great. And for our last presentation, we're going to go to Sweden to hear from Helen Nilsson in Malmo about their experiences with some stormwater management projects. So Helen, I will just make you the presenter, and then you can unmute yourself and share your screen when you're ready. We can...
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Let's see. Just get this. There, I think. No. So, okay. Right, thank you. And thank you for 2 very interesting presentations before. Mine's got a slightly different focus, especially from Lyon. Heat isn't really an issue in Sweden. So mine is more going to be focusing on, as Kate said, the issue of water. As Kate introduced, my name's Helen Nilsson. I'm a project manager at the Environment Department. And I should state very clearly, nature-based solutions isn't really my field. I work together with my colleague Elke Hesslerkrantz in the project Naturevation, and he is the specialist, but he was a bit reluctant to test his English in a presentation, so asked me to do it. So the examples are the ones that I've got from Elke, and I will answer any questions to the best of my ability. But if there are any questions at the end that I can't answer in our discussions, then I will try and get answers to you at a later date. Okay, let's see. So here we have Malmö. We're based in southern Sweden in the region called Skåne, and we're also in a region called Öresund region, which is the region of a part of Denmark and part of Sweden together makes the Öresund region, due to the name of the stretch of water between Denmark and Sweden. The bridge, the rather famous bridge, connects Sweden and Denmark, and approximately 75,000 people normally journey over the bridge every day, although that's not that many at the moment as Denmark has closed its borders. And approximately 15,000 people commute daily to and from Copenhagen and Malmö to work, and about 8,000 Swedes work in Denmark and live in Sweden. Right, and I thought I'd give you a little bit of background information about Malmö. It's Sweden's third largest city with a population of about 340,000. We're growing constantly. In 2018, we grew by just over 5,000 people, and births and immigration represents the major part of the expansion, and we're expected to increase by quite a lot in the coming years. But we're also quite a young city. 48%, so nearly half the population is under 35 and 1/5 are under 18. And we are the fastest growing large city in Sweden. But it's also quite a poor city because there's quite high unemployment amongst the young people. And we are historically an industrial city, but we're changing our structure, if you like, and we're now attracting more and more high-tech companies, and we also have a university. And the plan is to build 1,000 new homes in Malmö every year, which is a bit of a major goal, but we're trying. So when it comes to Malmö and sustainable development, I'm just going to try and move these screens that I've got. I don't know if you can see them, but I can see the little Go Meeting logos everywhere. But anyway, Malmö has been working with sustainability issues since the 90s, and we were the first city in Sweden to adopt the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we have as a goal, we want to be the most sustainable city in Sweden. And we have a goal that we want to be carbon neutral by 2020, and the whole city to run on renewable power by 2030. We've got a number of sustainable urban development sites. Julia is a whole new city district that's being built, and it's following the model of sustainable urban development. We have an eco city called Augustenborg, where there's all the assets of sustainability is taken into account, both the social, economic and ecological. And then in 2001, we had a very famous development area called the Western Harbour, Västra Hamnen, where there is dense urban development in an environmentally friendly way. Okay, we've also been a fair trade city since 2006, and we have over 500 kilometers of dedicated bike lanes. We're known for bicycling, and it also helps that Malmö is very flat as well. So when it comes to nature-based solutions in Malmö, the term is relatively new in Malmö, and in the comprehensive plan, the term ecosystem services is used rather than nature-based solutions. But there are a few examples of nature-based solutions in Malmö. And just moving that so I can see my screen. So, yeah, as I said, the term is being used more in terms of climate change adaptation, and it can be found it's starting to be seen in the planning process, but we need to find solutions for specific problems. There are a few examples of nature-based solutions in Malmö, and they can be found on our nature-based Naturevation database, and there's a link to that in my final slide. So you're welcome to look at that. Right. So I'm now going to talk about a couple of examples of different plans where a number of different departments in Malmo have had to work together to make things work. And the first is Malmo's cloudburst plan. So in 2014, there was the worst cloudburst to ever hit Malmo and Skåne. And the stormwater, it was called Storm Arvid, and the stormwater system could not cope with the amount of rain that we got, because we got 120 millimeters of rain in 6 hours. And it was after that that the politicians realized that something had to be done, because a large number of areas, including this picture of a road going under a bridge, and that is a bus, were flooded, which was obviously very expensive. So the politicians asked for a cloudburst plan, and the work started in the spring of 2015, and it was worked on during the rest of the 2015 and 2016, and in the spring of 2017 the plan was adopted by first the technical committee and then the municipal committee. It was agreed from day one that the responsibility for something like a cloudburst plan couldn't just be on one department. As they said in the introduction, if we work together, we can transform Malmo to a city that uses smart, multifunctional solutions to manage excessive rainfall in the best way. So there were a lot of different departments involved in the development of this plan, and there were all these different departments are also involved in the management of the work currently in place. So it's the Estates Department, the Streets and Parks Department, the Urban Planning Department, ourselves at the Environment Department, Service Department, the main city offices, plus the Municipal Water Company. And the important element that they're working on is that they want to take a multifunctional approach, because Malmo is a growing city, but we're also trying to grow inwards and become a more compact city. So all the areas that we have, the green areas that we have to use them in more than just one way. So if we're going to put in flood management, then they have to be areas that contribute to a more attractive and blue and green recreation areas. We have to ensure that there's safe and more sustainable management of stormwater, and it also has to create a better local climate and better and safer traffic environment. So there's lots of boxes that measures have to tick. Here's a little bit more about the plan. Basically, the plan deals with rain that cannot be managed by the stormwater system, and that can involve a risk for life, disruption in key services, serious person and material injury, and damage to the environment. And basically, the goal of the plan, the cloudburst plan, is that Malmo shall have an increased resistance and resilience to the consequences of cloudbursts. There is an action plan that's in place that was developed, and that is a decision and planning material that stipulates how Malmo should work to reach the goals set out in the cloudburst plan. And because basically due to global warming, cloudbursts will become more and more common in the future. And it was realized that the stormwater systems in place wouldn't cope. And the action plan was adopted in 2018, and it has to be updated every 4 years to make sure that it stays current and up to date. And I can now give you 2 examples of nature-based solutions that are involved in the cloudburst plan. And these have been put in place to mitigate effects of cloudbursts. The first is on the street Montgibu. It's in central Malmo, and it's the integration of management for cloudburst rainfall. At the same time, they were remodeling the existing area of a city, because these apartments you can see are new build. There was a wasteland there before. And when they were putting in these apartments and remodeling the area around it, they realized that this putting in rain beds to soak up water was a good way of creating a pleasant environment for the people who lived there, and creating some sort of calming for when it comes to traffic, and also one way of managing water. So the multifunctional aspect again. The second example is Riseberga stream. This is, although it doesn't look much maybe when you look at it, it actually is one of the most important watercourses in Malmo. A fifth of all rainfall in Malmo actually runs through that little stream. And the problem with the stream in its current condition is that it's very narrow and deep, which means that water rises very quickly when a lot of rain falls. So what they basically tried to do is flatten out the slopes around the stream to increase its capacity, and to increase planting to make it both more accessible to citizens of Malmo and to create a more attractive area. And this remodeling fulfills the function of managing water, but also creates an attractive environment for the citizens of Malmo, and makes them want to have easy for them to have access to the stream, and to make them want to use it more. When it comes to barriers and challenges, it's always difficult to ensure that there's funding in place for big projects and for these sorts of measures. That is also always going to be a challenge, but I thought I'd write it anyway. Another is there are a lot of departments involved, which means that there's lots of different groups involved, and that is always a challenge to coordinate a lot of different groups to make sure everyone's on the same page. But that is one of the reasons it's taken time, and that it took over 2 years to get, it took 2 years to get the cloudburst plan in place, but it was important that it took that long, so that everyone was on board in all the different departments. And finally, the last barrier and challenge, which is still in place, and I think it's always going to be there, it's the question of flood management on both private and public land, because obviously the city can only put in flood management mitigation measures on their own land. When it comes to private land, we don't have any authority to put any measures in place there. So that is one of the problems as I understand it in the future. So that was my first example. And the second example is the action plan for Malmo's coast. Because as you saw in the picture, in the second slide, or the map, Malmo is a coastal city. And in fact, more than 50% of Malmo's area is actually the marine environment. And we have 43 kilometers of coast, which is quite a lot. And there was a political decision to have an action plan for how Malmo was going to manage its coastal environment in the future. And it's a very new action plan because it was adopted in April of 2019, so it's only a year old. And it's only recently been updated, but I'll explain about that in a coming slide. Right, so Malmo has worked because it brings basically the work with the Coastal City of the Future plan brings together all the initiatives we do together from the different departments to strengthen Malmo's role as a coastal city. So it's really important for us to show that we are a coastal city. And the departments that are working together on this is the Estates Department, the Streets and Parks Department, the Environment Department, the Urban Planning Department, the Service Department, City Offices, both the Cultural Department, and the Leisure and Recreation Department. And they've had 3 different working groups where they've worked with coordination, communication, and reporting. And again, multifunctionality has played a major role here, because there is more of a focus here on the cultural and recreational value so far. But hopefully nature-based solutions will come into it more in the future. But it's looking at creating a culturally historical identity for Malmo. And it's also looking at creating an attractive commuter route from smaller towns further along the coast that people can then commute into Malmo. Creating attractive destination with cafes and cultural events along the coast, and as well as offering flood protection for the rest of the city. So the coast has a lot of functions. So it was a political decision, as I said, in 2018 to develop an action plan, and it was seen as an important part of the city's work to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And more specifically, number 6, 11, 13, 14, and 15. So looking at water quality, the city's environmental impact, looking at resilience to climate change, life in water and life on land as well. And there are a number of focus areas in the action plan, as well as 42 different activities. So they're looking at, that should be internal cooperation, that spell check got a bit haywire there. Looking at natural value and ecosystems, cleaner sea and coast, ocean literacy, recreation and experiences, urban and harbour development, climate adaptation, and external cooperation. As yet, there's not been that many direct nature-based solutions in the activities, but they will be coming as this is an active document, if you like. But they're looking at the re-establishment of shallow areas in the old industrial harbours, where they are traditional industrial harbours. You can imagine the berths when the ships come in are very deep, and they're trying to make them more shallow to re-attract marine life and to make them more natural and more attractive, both for people on the shore looking in and also for the marine life. They're looking at mapping the marine environment, identifying the key biotopes that exist along the coast that need protection. They're also looking at improving the water quality of bathing sites. And in addition, they're also looking at combining coastal protection with recreational activities. One example of that is they're looking at coastal defences, where they'll be creating raised banks or walls and planting them up with vegetation and having a cycle path, so that you're creating a pleasant green environment, you're creating a flood defence, and you're also creating a cycle path, so as a commuter route. So lots of win-wins there. And they're also looking to develop a strategy for coastal protection. Right, I asked my colleague who's been involved in this what the main barriers and challenges were. And he said when it comes to the financial, in the actual development of the action plan, there wasn't really an issue, because that was they were given funding. But now that the plan's in place, there is no extra funding. So the money has to come from their existing budgets. So from now on, there might be changes in the priorities when it comes to working on the action plan. And the action plan has actually had to be remodeled recently. It's only just gone through and approved again now in May, because one of the problems was the city employees who were involved in the action plan. They were putting forward suggestions for activities in the action plan that they actually hadn't got approval from their management and their steering committee in their departments. So when it came up to be approved, they then had to be sent back down again to the individual employees. So that was seen as a big learning lesson, that you have to make sure that what you want to put in the plan has to be approved on all levels before it goes in. So there has to be general consensus. That was seen as one of the most important lessons learned there. And that was me. There's a couple of links there. One to Malmo's homepage in English. If you want some more information about Malmo, there is a whole section on sustainability. And there's also the link there for the Naturevation homepage, where there's lots of information about the different cities involved in the Naturevation project and lots of information about nature-based solutions, not only in Malmo, but in the other cities as well. Okay, that was me. And now I will stop sharing my screen. I will try and do that.
Thank you very much, Helen. Another great presentation. And some of the lessons learned, or some of the key points from Malmo remind me of some of the key points that Frédéric set out in Lyon, that these green and blue spaces need to be multifunctional, especially in growing and dense cities, which therefore means that multiple departments have to be brought in to plan for them and to manage them. The two examples that you shared in Malmo showed multiple departments being incorporated into, firstly, a response to a crisis after the major flood, and secondly, into developing the city's identity as a coastal city. So, 3 very interesting presentations. I'm sure you have lots of questions. So I'm going to stop recording and then pass over to Chantal for the question and answer session. Thank you.